Are your cells healthy? I've had this conversation a couple times this past week in the clinic, and I work with patients with all kinds of health issues, health concerns, multiple diagnoses, complicated cases that they've really struggled to get relief through the traditional systems of isolated chasing symptoms only, and or just looking at one system. For example, the pain management clinic or a GI clinic or a POTS clinic. So, because it's important that we look at the whole person, structural, functional, emotional, what's going on in the gut, what's going on in the liver, how efficient is this person's body working, what's happened to it over a lifetime, how has it tried to adapt, how can we help unburden the body so that the cells and the tissues that make up the organs and the vessels and all of the tissues that are critical for making your hormones, for all of these chemical microbiology pathways in the brain, the neurons. There's so many brilliant biological things happening in your body all the time. But in order for those processes to be healthy, our cells have to be healthy. The cells that make up the body. The patient I was working with, we've made fantastic gains. History of POTS and chronic pain, chronic fatigue. Again, this patient has been labeled with so many labels. At the same time, we talk about the concern about being labeled so many times and having those labels become your identity. Those are important conversations to have. The unfortunate thing with complicated cases and multiple symptoms is you see many doctors. Those doctors don't talk to each other. They're not looking at your other systems. They're looking at your symptoms. Maybe they're looking at your labs. They're probably looking at your labs. And then they're giving you a medication. So by the time that patients tend to get to me, because they've been seeking, they're on many medications. And the sad thing is, with every single thing, right, whatever action occurs, there's a reaction. And often in the medication world, there's consequences that when you bring a drug, because many of these medications, although well-intended, tend to create the next set of issues in the body because they create a burden. Where we tend to see that a lot is in the liver. The liver has to work very hard to detoxify the body, and we're bringing in these chemicals in the form of pharmaceuticals, initially well-intentioned to address a lab, but actually as we look at labs and we look at the history of the person, we can unpack and really have a better understanding as to why this person is having cholesterol issues, why this person is having blood pressure issues, or whatever issues that resulted in a doctor prescribing pharmaceuticals. There are times when, yes, pharmaceutical is important and critical, but unfortunately that's really the only option that is offered to many patients in today's healthcare society. So by the time they get to me, we are working to unpack, we're working to restore the structural health of tissues and joints and organs and all of that through our manual therapy assessment and hands-on work. We're also looking to help them decrease the inflammation in their body. So we're talking about what we're eating, how the nutrients are so important, what are things that we're being exposed to, both food-wise that create inflammation, and toxicity-wise through our environment that create inflammation in the body. As we look at that medication list, they become pretty big. So with this patient, we make great gains with regard to the POTS symptoms, improving gains with regard to fatigue and energy, so slow but sure. But the chronic pain issues continue to be there, and I continue to work on mechanics. This person is working on some self-work, some supplements here and there. We do need to work on some dietary changes for sure. But my biggest concern is I feel his tissues, and I work with his body, and there's such a lack of health of his cells. And I can't say this for certain because I don't have anything to identify this for certain, but my concern is just the toxicity level of his cells. And he showed me some skin issues on his back, and you can see the lack of health through the skin. You can see the lack of health and the lack of vitality. So the more burden that comes into the system in the form of all of these medications that, a lot of these, he's still struggling with symptoms, but yet he's still on all these medications. So if we're on all these medications and we're not getting better, why don't we maybe try something different or come off of one? But that accumulated toxin load overloads the cells. And here's these cells that are trying to do their job, and liver is working hard. And so it disrupts all of these pathways, leading to a lack of cellular health, which creates a huge barrier for improving the health for somebody. Again, cleaning up diet for sure is going to make a big change, you know, watching stress, watching environment, but that toxic load in the body from the pharmaceuticals are my biggest concern. And I've got a couple of patients where I'm like, hey, this load is getting high. I can feel it in your tissues. You know, we're not making the gains we want. Your body is overburdened from a toxic chemical load. So I'm not saying don't go off your medications, but what I recommend to these patients is you need to find a really good integrative doctor, a functional medicine doctor who understands all of the systems and can help you systematically which medications are not critical or important, or what are other things that we can do and modify in your life to support the system where you don't need that medication. And again, like I said, in this case, he's on all these medications and he's still really not feeling much better. So we're overloading the system and we're not getting any return on investment for that. So be conscientious when you go to your doctor. And I do tell my patients often, like, be careful when you go to a doctor. Like when you've got new symptoms and you want to have a doctor figure it out, because that next doctor is going to look at labs and what do they have to offer you. Most of them are going to find a medication for you. And so each doctor you go to, you get another medication, and then that load continues to increase. Last little just note here is I worked with my mom during her time of Alzheimer's and seeking practitioners who can best help her and support her system. The original PCP, we went in there and I just said, hey, she's on 12 medications. And she's like, wow, that's not bad at all. Most of mine are on like 15 to 20. I very quickly found a new PCP for her, because that is absolutely unacceptable. The human body cannot handle toxins. We were not designed to ingest chemicals. We were not designed to. And how our bodies were designed, like when it is healthy, when our body is healthy, when we are watching our stress, taking care of nutrients, we're aware of genetics, so we can support our unique genetics. When we take really good care of our bodies and we know how to do that, our bodies work pretty well. They work pretty well, and we don't need all those medications.